4 planes hijacked and brought down in one day. It has many questioning the safety of the sky. Paul Baum is the editor of Aviation Security International, a former security chief at TWA, and he joins us from London this morning. Good morning, Mr. Baum.
Good morning to you.
Sir, this is the question that many Americans are asking right now. How could this happen? How could 4 commercial airliners be hijacked in the morning? And it's just beyond belief. How did it happen?
Absolutely, it is an absolute tragedy, the real nightmare scenario for the aviation security industry and, of course, for the American people and the world as a whole. The only thing that could have been worse would have been if it had been a chemical or biological attack on one of these cities. It would appear that the real failing has been on the intelligence side in preventing these incidents. In the past, intelligence has worked. You only have to go back to 1995 when American intelligence basically thwarted, in what was known as the Bojinga plot, the blowing up of 12 American airliners on one single day. That day, American intelligence worked. September the 11th, 2001, unfortunately, it all fell apart. And what the pictures that we've all been witnessing are those of really of a war scene. You could have been seeing those pictures of the Balkans or of the Middle East, and yet this was downtown Manhattan, downtown Washington. And that just sort of reminds me of...
Excuse me, Mr. Baum, you talked about the overall picture and intelligence, but what about the basics of airport security? And that is these people commandeering a plane. Would we be shocked at how easily that can be done and how easily it might have been done yesterday?
I'd love to say that I was shocked. Truth is, I wasn't. I was shocked by the outcome and the fact that probably at least 12 people could have decided to go to their deaths in such a tragic manner and bringing and killing so many other innocent people in the process. Yes, airport security procedures are going to have to be reviewed, especially domestically in the United States. I don't think it's a surprise that they targeted American Airlines and United Airlines, basically the 2 giants of the aviation industry. It used to be Pan Am and TWA. It's no surprise that they targeted flights that were going to the West Coast, to San Francisco and Los Angeles, so that on impact those planes would have been carrying far more fuel than any other aircraft in the sky, so the impact would have been that much greater. But certainly domestic aviation security is going to have to be reviewed. But that said, it's not such an easy thing to do. In Europe, we have a situation where only the passengers can go to the gates. In the United States, as many of your viewers will be well aware, anybody meeting or greeting passengers can go through the security checkpoints and up to the gates, right. Meaning that there's an increased stress on the screeners.
Mr. Baum, maybe as a security expert, you can tell us exactly what pilots and flight attendants are instructed to do in case of an emergency, in case of a hijacking. What are their immediate instructions procedurally?
Well, the procedures, unlike mechanical failures, are basically to evaluate the type of hijacker. There are 4 different types of hijackers. There are criminals, there are terrorists, there are asylum seekers, and there are the insane or the mentally disturbed. This may be a combination of different types, but you have to react to the type of hijacker you have. Now, if, as we're led to believe, that these were very violent people who simply got out of their seats and started slashing flight attendants, then there is only so much that one can do, and one would have expected them to have just sort of gone back to their natural survival instincts and done whatever they could possibly do to survive. What I do not believe was the case...
Go ahead, sir. Excuse me. Go ahead.
So I certainly don't believe that it was the pilots themselves, even at knife point or gunpoint, that would have intentionally flown their aircraft into the Twin Towers or into the Pentagon.
You mentioned this briefly, you touched on this, but what will this mean for the future, security-wise, for commercial airlines? What can you see maybe immediately and through the first few months after this situation?
Well, certainly, I mean, there's already been an increase to threat code Delta in the United States, so security is basically at its highest level of alert once the planes go back in the skies. But that said, so there won't be things like curbside check-in. There will be restricting access to the gate areas. But I think that it's possibly taken an incident like this to prove that domestic security has to be treated the same way as international security on international flights. In other words, that there needs to be positive passenger bag match, that if you check a bag in for a flight, that you travel on that flight, that only passengers go to the gate areas, and certainly that the identification checks that are carried out by the check-in agents are going to be much more stringent. That said, I don't think we need to focus solely on screening of passengers. This was a very well orchestrated attack. This involved insiders either in the airlines or in the airports. Certainly there are reports coming through this morning from Boston of people with contacts in the UAE with flight manuals were found in a car in Boston. These people knew what they were doing. They probably had very good contacts, and they didn't necessarily go through the passenger screening points.
All right, Philip Baum, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Vince, as dawn begins to break over the